Prepare to get electrified by Sailor Jupiter in this week's episode of Sailor Moon Crystal. Love Sailor Jupiter, still hate Chibiusa. I didn't like Chibiusa back in the Toonami days, I really don't like her now. Basically, she just sort of comes across as a bitch. She's nice to everyone except for Usagi, who probably is her mother from the future, and Prince Demand might also even have her future self captured within some sort of weird bubble. Either that or it's some sort of weird image. All I know is Prince Demand wants to destroy the legendary Silver Crystal, which is kind of a nice pace from the last villains who simply just wanted to use its power. I'm not sure why, but I'm really intrigued as to where Chibiusa's backstory is going, why she had to escape, and why she probably is from the future, and this could actually involve the future destruction of Tuxedo Mask and Sailor Moon. But the thing about this week's episode is it's very similar to the last two. Rinse and repeat. Focus on a different member of the Sailor Senshi, they fight, then they get captured. However, despite that, I'm still enjoying this arc like 50 times more than the first arc in the series. Maybe because we're actually starting to get some characterizations from these people, not just characterized by the fact that Sailor Jupiter is the strong one, or Sailor Mercury is the smart one, or that Sailor Moon is the stupid one. The point is, this week's episode actually makes you care a little bit more about the character of Mako, Sailor Jupiter, because in this week's episode, she's got a case of the flu, or some sort of weird sickness and virus, which has been created by Pets, another member of the Spectre Sisters, who brings with her own brand of putty patrol to try and destroy the Sailor Senshi and to capture Sailor Jupiter, because that's just what they're doing in this arc, capturing them all one by one. But the one thing that I think was really most intriguing about this episode, though, is that they took this side character by the name of Asanuma, this one kid who happens to go to school with Tuxedo Mask in their group, and he actually notices at the diner that Luna is talking. A cat is talking right there, and no one is even noticing it. Not to mention there's the weird frickin' android cat head that's just sort of rolling around, but he notices this and something's not quite right. And when he runs into Sailor Jupiter, she's giving off some static electricity. That's already strike two right there on the weird shit-o-meter going on for things that day. And then he finally learns, because Jupiter decides to tell him because of his earnesty, that they are indeed superhumans. They are still human and everything, but they have goals in mind to save their friends. And this is when Asanuma is completely impressed by Mako, and how can you not be? She's such a strong character. Her parents died when she was younger, she's taking care of herself, she's a freaking superhero, and doing all of this while still sick. And eventually it does get to the scene at the end where we get a big ol' action scene where Sailor Jupiter goes through her transformation sequences, fights against some putty patrol members, one of which that actually look just like her with these creepy green eyes, and then she goes out and battles against Pets, but it really doesn't last all that long. But I still love the fact that the animation does look like it's getting better, and despite the fact that this is definitely not an action series, it was pretty exciting by the end, but it pretty much went in the standard direction. She gets captured, and all that's left is Usagi and Sailor Venus. And then there were two. So what's the rundown? On this week's episode of Sailor Moon Crystal, another pretty decent episode of the series, one that's actually starting to make me care about the characters a little bit more. It shocks me that they've been sort of repeating the same premise over and over and over, but it's still more interesting. The villains are cooler, they seem like they have bigger goals in mind. There's the whole Chibiusa backstory, which is all about her possibly being from the future. I just don't like the character of Chibiusa at all, though. That's the only thing. I just don't care for her whatsoever, because they're just sort of beating around the bush. It's really only a matter of time before her and Usagi actually finally start getting along with each other, but they're probably always going to have that playful rivalry. I also love the fact that they did tease Sailor Pluto in this week's episode. That's actually something that Chibiusa actually brought up, but this is Sailor Jupiter's episode. This one really belongs to Mako, and I really like that they are focusing on them a little bit, learning about their backstories, their family, what it really means to be those characters, and how they represent their actual transformations and everything, and I thought that was handled really well. The character of Asanuma, you know, I barely remembered him when he popped up. At first, I actually thought it was Usagi's little brother. I had no idea who this kid was. All I know was it seems like he has some sort of like romantic involvement with Jupiter in this week's episode, which was very nice and surprisingly cheesy and heartwarming. Really not the type of stuff I'm looking for. But then again, I am definitely not the demographic for this show. I'm looking at it for nostalgia's sake because I used to watch it on Toonami. What I will say is this week's episode really didn't like reinvent the wheel or anything, but it's still moving in the right direction. At least right now, I think this arc is a little more interesting, and I can't wait to learn a little bit more about the other members. If they're going to keep doing this, Sailor Venus is probably next, which means it's just going to be Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask who are going to have to save the day. And then, of course, that leaves us with Chibiusa. What is she going to do? Is she going to go through some sort of transformation sequence? Does she have these Sailor Scout Senshi powers? We're just going to have to watch and find out. On the technical side of things, this week's episode looked pretty decent, but nothing mind-blowing. Just pretty much average anime, but still pretty pleasing to the eyes, especially if you read the Sailor Moon manga, because it tends to look a little bit more like that, but nothing groundbreaking. Despite that, this was still a pretty entertaining episode of the series, so if you have been following Sailor Moon Crystal, check this one out. It's actually got some pretty interesting things going for it, and you'll get to learn a little bit more about Sailor Jupiter, so get excited. I'm going to give this week's episode a 3 out of 5, just a good average episode of Sailor Moon Crystal that you should definitely check out. Thank you guys for watching my review. If you liked this video, how about giving it a thumbs up? And before you leave, maybe you could tell me what you thought about this week's episode of Sailor Moon Crystal. Did you have a favorite moment? Do you like Sailor Jupiter? What do you think is going to happen in the rest of this Black Moon arc? Remember guys, subscribe to our channel if you've not already, and make sure to check us out on Facebook and on Twitter, and watch our brand new podcast show, The Powerful Nerdcast. I'll put a link for that in the description box below. Thank you guys again for watching. Super Kami Guru 9000. Out.